we want to tell you about another podcast from PRX called Monumental. This podcast explores questions about the past, present, and future of U.S. monuments, uncovering the stories about what and who is important, as well as the stories that have been left out. Join host Ashley Seaford across the country with their team of journalists. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, the first week of October 1996, Fox News launches to 17 million cable subscribers. 1996 was an election year, of course, but it would take one more cycle for Fox News to really make its mark. By 2000, it was a cable force, and in the years after, it solidified itself as the most popular news channel on TV and a critical arm of the modern GOP, especially in those years following 9/11. Those early years of Fox News are the subject of the latest season of Slate's Slow Burn series. It is hosted by our friend of the show, Josh Levin, who joins us once again. Josh, welcome back. And this is the 10th season of Slow Burn? My gosh.
It is. Thank you for having me, Jody. I've worked on all of them, so credit and blame in correct proportions should go to me.
You are the Roger Ailes of Slow Burn.
That's right.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Fair enough. And here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
So yeah, this new season is called Slow Burn, The Rise of Fox News. But can you take us to those early days, October 96? Did you go and watch the tapes? What did people see when they turned on their TV and saw this new cable channel?
Fox News Now. That's what they saw. That was the first morning show. The first people on the air were Louis Aguirre and Allison Costarini, who did not turn out to be longtime Fox people. But it was very straight news every 15 minutes. And the vibe that you get from watching that kind of first 3 hours of Fox was it didn't really have much of a political valence, with one exception that I'll mention in a second. But it was every 15 minutes we're going to turn over and it'll be faster, snappier, louder, quicker than CNN or, MSNBC had launched a couple of months earlier, but they were kind of totally off the map. It was really CNN was the competition. And so, if you watched this morning show, this news show, you wouldn't necessarily have a sense of what the content would be later that night when the O'Reilly Report was in the lineup from day one, later renamed the O'Reilly Factor, and Hannity and Colmes as well, later to become just Hannity. That was there as well. But from the beginning, there was this kind of bifurcation between the news stuff and the opinion stuff. But there would, just be this more opinion-y content that would seep in. And a thing that didn't make it into our series, but we found really fascinating was there were movie reviews. And the first movie review on this morning show was of Spike Lee's Get on the Bus.
Oh, boy.
And it's about people going to the Million Man March, right? Yeah,
about the Million Man March. And so the guy who reviewed it was Bill McCuddy, who we do have in our show. He came from America's Talking, the predecessor Roger Ailes channel, and he was the entertainment reporter. And he said it was a really good movie. He gave it a good review. But he then quickly transitioned into saying, I wanted to ask all the people in the movie, like Spike Lee, Andre Braugher, about Louis Farrakhan's support of Gaddafi, I believe. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. But yeah, that's what you would see for the first 3 hours of Fox News.
It's fascinating because so much of what people have come to understand about Fox News is baked into that first day, right? That kind of dual nature. We report, you decide, but also fair and balanced, being defined as both just being objective, but also being a conservative counterweight in the form of Hannity and O'Reilly to CNN and to other news outlets. It's interesting to see that kind of baked in right from the beginning.
Yeah, especially with O'Reilly. I forgot all about him for some reason.
Yeah, he's a big subject of our series because he was there from the beginning, and he was somebody who was kind of like one of these misfits that Roger Ailes brought in, who was a network washout. Like, he had been at CBS and ABC with no great success. He had been at Inside Edition after that, which you will know if you've seen the We'll Do It Live video.
We'll Do It Live.
But he had no kind of big profile when he came into Fox. And there were a lot of people like that. You know, a big difference between the Fox of then and the Fox of today is they had to draw on a pool of people who had quote unquote mainstream media backgrounds. Like, they hired from NBC, ABC, CBS. And so these people had come in with their own journalistic training and background and experience.
The first editor was a magazine editor, right?
Yeah, this guy, John Moody, who's also a huge subject of our series and a fascinating character. But it was only later when you have people like Jesse Waters, for instance, who is like a total creation and creature of Fox News. People who, instead of going somewhere else, like, they go to Fox News for their training and just are fully immersed in that brand and lifestyle from the, you know, day one of their journalistic careers.
Yeah. Did Ailes, in those early days when he talked about the channel, did he, and you could give us a little background on Roger Ailes too, and his, you know, we're actually in the midst of using this as a sort of kickoff to a series of episodes we're doing about kind of the media environment, and Roger Ailes kind of runs through all of that. And so it's, in a way, Roger Ailes week here on this day. But, you know, he was a GOP operative. He comes over. He's now working on Fox News. When he talked about it in those early days, did he talk about a sort of dual nature between news and opinion? Did he recognize a tension there or a risk there? I mean, how self-aware were they about the kind of monster or the sort of Frankenstein nature of what they were trying to pull off?
There's all sorts of dualities. I mean, Niki mentioned this before, and I'd love to hear her thoughts. Just shout out to Messengers of the Right and Partisans, both like hugely helpful to me and kind of learning about conservative media and the conditions that led to Fox being created. But there's so many dualities here, right? There's we report, you decide. There's fair and balanced. There's opinion and news. And they were very self-conscious, Ailes and Murdoch, from the like kickoff press conference in saying two kind of different things, which were, we only want to be fair and objective. And also, this is an alternative. It's an alternative news channel. And it is an alternative because the rest of the media is too liberal. They wouldn't say we're conservative. They would say everyone else is too liberal. And it reminds me a little bit of like a playground situation where a kid hits another kid, and then the second kid like hits them 100 times harder. It's like, you made me do it. Like, we didn't want to be an alternative. Like, we wouldn't need to exist if you guys were just normal, straight, fair, and balanced. And so, yeah, Niki, I'd love to hear you kind of talk about that and how it like fits into this like larger kind of conservative grievance culture around media.
Conservative grievance culture is a great way to put it, because in many ways, Ailes and Fox News and Murdoch are all the heirs to this argument that had been built over the course of decades. This idea that not only were these existing media biased toward liberalism, but that the conservative viewpoint and the conservative media infrastructure, it could be both objective and biased because the conservative viewpoint was the correct viewpoint. So being right-wing and being right was the same thing. And that's the way they sort of squared what feel like contradictions between objectivity and bias. And that's something that they're articulating in like the 1950s and 60s. And so by the time Fox News comes around, you have a generation or two of conservatives who want to consume, are looking for more conservative news outlets. And of course, it takes a while for Fox to kind of take off. But really from the start, they're building in some ways off of the model and success that Rush Limbaugh demonstrated. He's really the first person to really cash in on right-wing media. Ailes, as you know, was the producer for his 4-year-long television show, and then goes from that to Fox News and brings a lot of that same entertainment to it. And that's the big difference with Fox News and with Rush Limbaugh, is that they're entertaining and they're fun to watch in a way that earlier forms of conservative media weren't. And so you get that combination of ideology and entertainment, and it turns out they managed to grow a pretty big audience for that eventually.
Yeah, and Jody, just to add on to your question earlier, Ailes would acknowledge having conservative voices. I mean, how could you not acknowledge that? But he said, we only just seem conservative because other places have no conservative voices. So we are conservative compared to that. But then he would just run off the kind of short list of people that were not, whether it's like Alan Colmes or whether it's journalists like Mara Liasson or, people, he would basically be like, yeah, we have conservatives and we have liberals too. I mean, a lot of the people they said were liberals weren't actually liberals, but.
And there was a real strategy there too, because, Hannity, who is still at Fox News and was there from the beginning, that show was initially called Hannity and Liberal TBD, because they knew they wanted to pair him up with a liberal, but they hadn't picked one yet.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the Fox liberal is a subject of the fourth episode of our series. And we get into the Colmes of it all.
And the Juan Williams, I'm sure, was in there and all that stuff. But Kellie, did you say you met Roger Ailes at one point?
I did. I met him in my senior year of college. So I was...
He came to Howard?
He came to Howard. I was working at the Howard University Magazine. I was like their student reporter, basically. And Fox News had given a donation to Howard's journalism school. It was like maybe $50,000 or something like that. It was not a lot of money. And there was a lot of blowback. Like a lot of professors were like, first of all, if you're going to donate, this is nothing. This is chump change. This is not a significant donation. It might have even been $10,000. It was not significant.
What year was that, Kellie?
This had to be 2003 because I graduated 2004. So 2003, 2004. Yeah. And so I had to go to this event where the Howard University president was there and a whole bunch of other people and ask him questions about, why Howard, and tell us about this donation and what do you hope it will do and yada, yada, yada. And I remember I had sort of like a pang of conscience because I didn't know how to write the article because so many people were mad. And Howard University Magazine said, if you don't write this article like anything other than a general press release, you can't work here. And so I was like,
oh, dang.
What? And so then I was taking the ethics and journalism class, and my professor was like, this is great. Let's workshop this. So we came up with all these ideas of, should I publish it? Should I not publish it? I wound up publishing it. It does read like a press release. It's basically like donor gives donation. That's literally what it is. And it circulated for a couple days of people just saying this is messed up. Howard shouldn't be taking this money. Yada yada yada. So yeah, it didn't go over well.
That's fascinating because I have a little bit of context on that, which is that in 2003, Fox News sponsored the Congressional Black Caucus presidential debate, and it was a partnership between Elijah Cummings and Ailes.
Howard alum.
Yeah,
wow.
and I didn't know about the Howard piece of it, but Morgan State got a lot of money, which was in Maryland, Elijah Cummings' estate, and they got scholarships and they got internships for their students at Fox. Yep. And that's really fascinating to hear that there's a blowback at Howard, because I was looking into this and I didn't see that much. There was maybe a couple articles in the black press about it, but it wasn't until 2007 when Fox sponsored or tried to sponsor the Congressional Black Caucus debates again, and those got canceled because people there was so much outrage around it. And I think that's a really big and telling difference between 2003 and 2007. You can chalk it up to internet, online culture. I think was a big differentiator between 2003 and 2007. Yep. But the kinds of critiques that were being leveled against Fox in the early 2000s. And we get into this in the series, were way more focused around partisanship than they were around things like race, Fox's treatment of race and gender. And that really becomes more of an issue for them and more of a kind of locus of protest later in the 2000s.
Yeah, yeah.
And it does feel like later in the 2000s, you have more of a machinery among liberals and among journalists that are critiquing Fox News, right? And they're putting it at the center of a critique of the journalistic ecosystem, a critique of the right more generally, and that takes time to build.
Yeah.
I don't know when you're starting to first see it, but
it's also a reflection of the power that Fox News has by that.
Absolutely,
point,
right.
Yeah.
That it skyrockets, like it becomes not only so much bigger, right? It has it's making so much more money. It is reaching so many more people. Because in 1996, it's not reaching not that many people are tuning in.
No, not at
but
all.
by the time you get to 2000, 2001, it really starts to be a leader and a driver of narratives and a helpmeet of the Republican Party in really obvious ways. And that, I think, that combination.
And that was part of the pushback, because part of it was, this organization is not serving the Black community at all, like that their agenda is not adjacent with the Black community. But then the other side of it is sort of like, this is a leading news organization. They have goo-gops of money. Why are they not donating even more? But then it's like, do you want their money? But then at HBCUs, they're always starving for resources and for finance. So it just became this really messy quandary about, like, who do you take money from and what does it look like? And
really similar to the debate about tobacco companies, like, giving money to the NAACP. Like,
Yep.
really, really similar.
It's pretty clear to everyone by now that social media has changed everything from the way we live to how we discuss politics and what we think we know about the world around us. Which begs the question, who's in charge here? Hi, I'm John Favro, former Obama speechwriter turned chronically online host of Offline with John Favro. Join me every week just outside your social media-fueled echo chamber for a smarter, lighter conversation about the real-time changes and real-world effects of social media and the internet on all of our lives. Check out Offline with John Favro every Sunday wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, so the first half of our series, it's 6 episodes, is really about the rise of Fox. The second half of the series is about the rise of Fox's critics, antagonists, activists. We look at everything from The Daily Show to Air America Radio to, Move On and the documentary Outfoxed. And it is this kind of, really burgeoning anti-Fox movement. And so, like, when I don't know if any of you guys were at the anti-RNC protests outside Madison Square Garden in 2004. But it's just amazing to, like, watch the footage of that. And it's just like anti-Bush chants with anti-Fox chants, like kind of back to back. And that it had become, for the left, just a mission to defeat Bush and to defeat Fox, like, all at the same time. And that's why our series ends with the 2004 election. Yeah. Because that's when Fox ended, obviously.
Yes. Well, so I do want to ask you a question about now, or at least the last 5-6 years. But going all the way back to this 1996 to 2000 period, because I think, post 9/11, Iraq War, that's where Fox, I think, starts to really both find a story that it can really cover, and it starts to become really enmeshed with Bush-era politics. But in those quote-unquote early years, Josh, you and I have, worked in media for a long time. I mean, I think, what happens is often and this is just the way humans operate, but, like, you have your principles and you have your sort of lodestars and you have the way you want to do your job. But then there's also a feedback effect, right? And you try something and people like it, and then it creates this sort of incentive to do more of it, and there is a slippery slope there. And I'm just wondering, if you could pinpoint, or if you just saw a dynamic in those early years where Fox was maybe going in with intentions to be a genuine counterbalance, but also, fair and balanced and all those things. And then when did it start to kind of get that feedback of, like, the takes, the grievance, the sort of, more outright conservative partisanship is the thing that people are responding to?
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't get into it in the series, but some people point to Monica Lewinsky as a moment when Fox kind of took off, and Fox covered it really aggressively, but in, like, a sort of tabloid sort of way. And that's, like, a really important thing to understand about Fox, is that both Ailes and Murdoch had tabloid backgrounds. And so there is this kind of tabloid soul to, New York Post, and all of that connection is really important throughout the history of Fox News. But it is really around the 2000 election, and that's why we started there in our first episode. It's like, election night, Bush's cousin is running the decision desk, and that's something that we go into at great length. But it's really during the recount when there's this market differentiation. Like, there are these moments in American history, and you can't really predict them, when just everyone is going to be following the news for a day, for a week, for a month. And this was a month where everyone was following the news. And so naturally, no matter what you were doing, if you were the news, people were going to be watching you. But Fox had this differentiation in the market, which is this was a very like red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat moment. And they were giving the like pro-Bush side of the story. And like CNN and MSNBC and the networks weren't doing that. And so there's like a huge proportion of the country that, Ailes argued this, that were like kind of underserved. Like if you wanted partisan right kind of take on this, like you kind of had to go to Fox, and everybody else was just like splitting the pie. And so that's when Fox like zooms past MSNBC forever, basically, and gets really close to CNN, which was just shocking. I mean, and it just sort of 9/11 is when it went past CNN forever, but it was really the 2000 election that started it.
I was going to ask that. Wait, what year does Fox News become number one out of all the? Yeah,
it's like January of 2002. It's like,
wow.
And there's also this moment, like you look back, the New York Observer had this great piece, like that's really a moment in time, like right after 9/11, that said Fox actually looks like totally out of step with what America wants and needs right now. It made a dated reference that I love, which is that they look like Bridget Jones in the Playboy bunny outfit showing up to the party when everybody else is in a suit. And so there is this moment when like CNN, like it did during the first Gulf War, it becomes just like the place where everyone goes. But then there's this transition from the news to talking about the news. And so it's really during the war on terror and the ramp up afterwards that Fox not only like catches up, but like zooms past CNN forever.
2004 is such a interesting and great place to end the story because, Fox will undergo many evolutions after that, right? And that switch to focusing more on race and gender, which they're definitely doing in advance of the Obama era, the relationship with the Tea Party, the shifts that it's making as Donald Trump becomes the leader of the party, its efforts to sort of battle back against new competitors from its right. But the special sauce is there by 2004, the thing that is going to make Fox News such a powerful force in U.S. politics and media is pretty locked in by 2004. So that's a great way to bound the series.
Yeah, and you also we get into Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, which is this like huge moment for media. So it's a lot.
This is a huge topic, and and I know you get into it a little bit, and is sort of one of the big central questions around Fox. But do you come down, or do you have an understanding of the kind of tail wagging the dog nature of Fox News's relationship with the GOP? I mean, did you kind of start to see it, as I think maybe lots of liberals see it, that like it is Fox News is actually setting the agenda for politicians, or did you kind of come to a different understanding of the way those two talk to each other?
Seems like a both and kind of situation. John Moody, who we mentioned briefly before, who'd come from Time Magazine and was sort of like the editorial czar of Fox. One of the things in our series that I think makes it really worth listening to is that we have a bunch of Fox people who've never done interviews before, talking like and like people who were kind of rank and file, like actually doing the work. And so they talk about, John Moody starts sending these memos like right after Bush comes into office, and they find that these daily memos, which are saying like, here's what we should be focusing on today, a lot of it is just like directly following on what the administration is saying. Like one like pretty concrete example is Ari Fleischer starts talking about, we're not going to call them suicide bombers, we're going to call them homicide bombers. And AP and a bunch of other news organizations like actually come out and say, we're not changing our style guides, like whatever. And Fox like comes out and says the exact opposite. It's like on Fox, they're now homicide bombers. And there are other examples like that, kind of both big and small. But then you also have this thing that like Bob Woodward reported in 2002, which is that Roger Ailes sends a note to Karl Rove to give to Bush that's like, the American people expect you to respond to these attacks in the harshest possible terms. And so, people note that Fox News is on every TV in the White House. And so I don't think it's as simple as saying it was one or the other, that there was a switch flipped at a certain point. I think there was like a mutual recognition of shared interest and purpose rather than it going in one direction or the other.
This Sunday, so we've been doing on the weekends in these last few weeks leading up to the election, we've been talking about the current race a little bit. And so this Sunday, we're going to, talk about the current race. And I think one of the things we're going to talk about, since we are in this sort of media environment week, is how it does feel like, at least to me, but I think more than any other time I've seen, it feels like the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign are basically, talking to completely different media environments and just like doing their own thing that are running on parallel tracks. And so I'm curious for all of you where you see Fox News fitting into that dynamic. I mean, is it still the force that it was? Has it sort of kept up with the fracturing and dismantling media environment, or is it still just trying to kind of be the Fox News it's been for the last 20 years?
First of all, I think that the observation is right, that we have moved into
Thank you. We can end right there.
much more fragmented media environment. Like even the age of sort of mass social media is coming to an end, which leads to a diminished impact for any outlet, right? Something might take off on Truth Social and not even really make much of a splash on a site like Twitter. Or TikTok. And so I think that's one of the things that's happening. And Fox News in that ecosystem is being punched in a lot of different directions. Right now, it has like a lot of new right-wing competitors that it has to respond to because it risks losing its legitimacy with its audience if it doesn't. It's cable news, which it's being demographically walloped because fewer and fewer people are watching cable news. And it still wants to be a player in driving the message. But I think that it has less of an ability to do that in part because of all of how fractured the environment has become, the ways that candidates themselves can kind of bypass media outlets altogether thanks to social media. And also because there is such a strong media criticism industry now that if a outlet like the New York Times starts framing everything in terms of Fox News, then people are going to criticize them much more heavily than they would have in, say, 2003 or 2004.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we kind of talked about this, I guess, a couple weeks ago, but like, it's the idea that politicians don't have to do 60 Minutes anymore. They don't have to do Fox News or CNN. They can go to podcasts. They can go to TikTok. They can go to people who are not trained journalists and sort of have conversations that will meet much wider audiences. And that seems to be like really the scary shifty narrative, because I feel like, by putting these conversations in the hands of people that are not really equipped to have meaningful conversations, is what's a little like daunting to me. We even talked about this with just like podcasts, history podcasts, and like who does them and all of that stuff. It's like, I think that's what Fox News is up against now, especially with the younger generation that's not watching the news. They're not reading the news. They're literally getting it in social media or YouTube or what have you. And I think that's a little bit, the next generation is going to be a little bit harder to crack.
I think like so many things in history, just depending on how you look at it, the rise of Fox feels either inevitable or like a total accident. On the inevitable side, it's like what I was saying about the 2000 election. It's just so clear that there was a market desire for what they were providing, and whoever was going to provide it was going to succeed. And in our society. But as far as the accident of history part, there was only one cable news channel before MSNBC and Fox launched. And it was a moment when cable was still on the rise. And so if the idea for Fox had come a little bit later, I don't know if it would have worked so well. Or if Roger Ailes hadn't been available, I don't know if it would have worked so well. But now, I mean, I co-sign everything that you guys said. It's just like cable doesn't really matter the same way that it used to. I wouldn't say that it doesn't matter at all, but, you know, talking about the election, I think it does matter on election nights. And so that's a moment, like there's not really any moment in the last few months, I don't know about you guys, where I've been like, I've got to turn on Fox News just to see what they're saying or what like that side of the fence is saying. Like I can find that viewpoint without turning on a television, like very easily. But on election nights, that is one of those times when I think a lot of people, whether out of partisan interest or whether out of curiosity or perverse interest, are going to want to be like, what is Fox saying? Like, how are they reacting to this? But those days, I think, are kind of getting fewer and further between.
I mean, it's basically sporting events and election nights are the only two kind of live. Everyone gathers in the same kind of place to
the only
watch
remaining part of the monoculture.
No, it's true. That's true.
I mean, their future is just so fascinating to me, and I think is also a reason why I wanted to do this. It's like never felt more uncertain or tenuous with like whether it's the Murdoch lawsuit, whether it's like Newsmax and OAN, whether it's cord cutting in general, whether it's litigation against them. Just like it could go in so many different directions, from like Fox ceasing to exist to it like finding a new path to like just continued or increased relevance. I could go like any possible way.
In 20 years, we'll have you back for Slow Burn, the new rise of the new Fox News.
The reboot.
Slow Burn, the rise of the Bro podcast.
It'll be the remake, but it'll be a musical this time.
All right, Josh, this has been really great. And I do have to say something that is like a little, you're a much more august journalist than I am. And so I've said this before, and I think on this show, and I will say it again, but, you know, if I had to pick the kind of most destructive force in my lifetime, Fox News might be at the top of that list. I mean, really. And so, you know, I just feel like it's important to say that. And I think it's really fascinating to look at these early years and then see that evolution going into the 2000s. But I'm glad you did this series. And this is a nice little routine we're in here. You make a series. You come on and talk about it. You go away for a while. We keep making the show. And then you make another series. You come back. You talk about it. So, you know, let's do the next one.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Fair and balanced. Where news is going. Where news should be. Where to find it. Fox News Channel. What people want. What sets us apart. What makes the difference. Fair and balanced. Fox News Channel.
This is Fox News Now, all the news you need in 15 minutes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Allison Costarini. At the top of the news this morning, the first presidential debate is now history. President Clinton and Bob Dole faced off in Hartford, Connecticut for the first in a series.